Hey guys, welcome to FunNGun. I figured since this little belt box turned out so good and I'm pretty proud of that, I figured I'd go ahead and make a video kind of going over how I made it, because I figured someone else would find that interesting, because I find that kind of thing interesting because I actually did make this full belt box from scratch. And why I call this my miniature belt box is, as you can see here, this is the original belt box that come with an LM7 belt fed 22, and it is significantly larger, and that is even more evident when you go ahead and put mine on top of it. You can see that mine is smaller in all dimensions. And the reason behind this little belt box is because when you're using the original belt box, it is a little bit harder, or quite a bit harder, to get your hand onto the front handguard when you're trying to shoot this offhand. And these belt boxes are set up for 200 rounds, and I only have one 200 round belt anyways, other than the links. So the fact that this holds the 100 round and 50 round belts perfectly fine, that is what this is set up for. It makes it really more practical in that way as well, because this is really just way too large for either one of those belts. You don't really need that. So let's go ahead and get into how this is made. I started off by taking one of my 100 round belts and counting over how many rounds, and that was how I got the width I wanted. And I believe this is 8 rounds across. And I went ahead and S the belt back and forth and then stacked it into that so I could see how much space I needed this way and also right across there. That's how I went ahead and found that dimension, is by stacking the belts and getting some measurements off of them. And I took a piece of cardboard and went ahead and made a mock-up of the dimensions that I came up with from the belts being stacked that way. And that's what you're going to see in these pictures. I'm going to start inserting pictures right here to the side of the video, kind of going over, or showing you, what I did here. So what you'll see there is the kind of the mock-up made out of cardboard, and I stacked the belt down into it and it fit just fine. So once I know that those dimensions were the size I needed, the rounds had enough space on the sides here so they weren't going to drag and everything, I went ahead and folded that piece of cardboard back open and transferred it over to a piece of scrap metal I have. And as you see there, I have an X on that one line. That is the actual width, or the actual size of the cardboard itself. I went ahead and decided to add a little bit to it there just to make sure I didn't cut that whole piece and just need a little bit more, and that ended up paying off pretty good, as you'll see here later on here. So once I had that part cut out, I went ahead and started figuring out and making the lines to bend it into the actual box itself. And I originally had planned on bending it and only welding one side, but with the tools I had, that proved to be impossible, because there was no way to get a nice sharp bend on the last edge to close the side over. So what I ended up doing instead, as you'll see later on in this, I actually went ahead and cut that completely, that side off here. And at that point, I went ahead and moved into making the actual mounting assembly here, which was actually probably the hardest part of this, because I had to figure out how to replicate the original mounting system, which is these two little ovals right here. And they just interface with the belt box adapter right here, and they land in these two little channels down here. And I actually ended up changing it up a little bit. As you can see here, I got a little bit more surface for mine to hang on to the adapter here, because as you can see right here, these kind of chip off and break, and I've had quite a few of these chip around, or chip off on the edges there on these little the boxes I already have. So I figured I'd go ahead and add some extra material there to hang on to this a little better, which this material, not exactly sure what kind of plastic this is. This is actually just a plastic that my grandpa gave me a while back that he had from making something and told me I could use to make some stuff, and appreciate that, because it's coming in quite handy, as you'll see in multiple different parts of this belt box adapter here, or the belt box adapter here. So what I started off by doing is going ahead and making the actual part itself here, the mount. And to space the holes out, what I did was I went ahead and put the box over it and drilled the holes to where they would sit up against the top part of the actual adapter here. So that way I knew that I had the correct space, so when they shimmed down, or actually I take that back, I did it on the bottom part of it, so that way I knew when they were setting in there, they had the correct amount of space in between them that would allow it to lock in. And then I went ahead and made the little shims that are sitting down in here, and it's kind of hard to see them, but once I made them, I went ahead and sanded them down to the width of the actual material here on the box adapter, so when this locks in, it doesn't have a lot of wobble to it. So once I had all that set up and you could stick it in there and they keyed into these holes properly, I went ahead and made the tabs here that lock it onto the mount and got everything drilled up, and I went ahead and put everything together, did a dry run onto it to make sure it would still fit onto the mount here itself, and everything, as you'll see there in the picture, fit just fine, locked down as it does now. So I went ahead and moved on to mounting this to the box itself, and that's where you see right there where I cut the side off of it. It's just an open side there, doesn't have a bottom on it yet, and that is when I moved into making the part that interfaces with the belt feed tray itself. This took me a little while to figure out. I made 3 or 4 versions of this before I got it to actually work, and this is actually not the one you'll see in the pictures because I actually did drop it, or this belt box when I was at a competition, breaking one of the ears off. So I've actually made another iteration of it here, and it works just as good and actually looks a little better in my opinion. But the way this was made was I took the same material as here, and what took me so long to figure out is I didn't know how hot I had to get it to bend it, and it kept cracking in different places. So that's why the second version here came out a little better. I kind of knew what I was doing. And as you'll see there, it's oversized, and that's kind of how I did go ahead and oversize it, and then you can shape it to fit how you want to afterwards. But it's also, that's why this loops back around, because on the original box you see here, there's a large step right here. This kind of pops out a little bit, and that is so when you go to insert this into the gun, this will clear the actual mag well itself, like the little lip on it. So when you go to insert the box with the adapter, it doesn't run into it. And we'll get a little bit more into that in a second. But so that is why this part is also bumped out just a little bit. Instead of being flush on there, you needed that extra space, and it also gave me the space to clear these 2 nuts. And that's what I said I was going to get into in a second, is I actually had to sand these nuts down significantly after putting them in. That's what's holding the upper piece in right here. And the reason I had to sand those down is because when you go to insert this into the mag well, or the whole assembly into the mag well, these would actually run into the mag well, and I've actually got a scratch on my mag well on my rifle now where I did that. So these got sanded down, and this, like I said, that space is enough away from the gun so that'll fit. So as you can see there, all the pieces fit together, and at that point I went ahead and tested to make sure that the belts would line up with everything and fall into the box correctly. So I went ahead and put the 50 round belt. That's the one you see in the first picture, and the second picture here, that is the 100 round belt. So at that point I knew that I did not need this edge anymore. I went ahead and left it on there, and the whole process, it was a lot easier to go ahead and make that with the edge already on there, because you just built the box. And then I went ahead and cut that edge off because I knew I had enough room for the belt to go ahead and lay down in here and have plenty of space to feed out of this. And I really could have made it a little bit thinner, or not quite as tall, but that's really just kind of how it fits with the actual adapter itself. You got a little bit of overhang right there. So could have made it a little thinner there, as you can see there, because it still has quite a bit of space above it where the belt goes in, but turned out to be a real good size either way. So at that point, I went ahead and took the adapter and the part that interfaces with the feed tray back off of it. And as you'll see, I have it laying here on the back plate. I cleaned up the edges and went ahead and welded both edges together to go ahead and get it into the actual full box. At that point, I went back and mounted the mount for the adapter here back onto the box. And it actually used to come all the way down to the edge right here. And I figured this was going to be a problem because when I welded the bottom right here on, it obviously, being hot, melted a little bit. So I went ahead and shaped it, kind of rounded it off and got rid of all that anyways. Turned out just fine. But then I had to mount this before I forget to say. The reason I had to mount this before I welded the bottom on is because there is no way to get an Allen wrench down to the screws that are holding this in, because they are ran in from the inside. So what I guess I could have done is welded them on the inside, and then I could have went ahead and threaded these on afterwards. But other than that, there would be no way to get to them. And they have lock nuts on them, so they're not going anywhere anyway. So that worked out just fine. But then I welded the bottom onto it. After having the bottom welded onto it, I went ahead and made the plate to cover up the hole that I cut out, welded that onto it. And at that point, I went ahead and cleaned all the edges up and went in and tested it onto the gun itself. And as you'll see here, it turned out pretty good. It fit onto the gun just fine. That's before I had cleaned up the edges on, or the little ears here. Like I said, that was the original one anyways, but fit the gun, went out and test fired it. Ended up spray painting it black originally, and that was kind of just skinning up real bad. So what I ended up doing is I'd seen this be used for, a company makes a cover for a red dot to kind of protect them. So I picked this up from a company called Holstersmith off Amazon, and it is their EDC wrap, made to wrap a holster. Went ahead and wrapped it, and it kind of gives it a fabric-y look. And that is a single piece wrap, with this being the only side that wasn't part of that. So this is the second part, so it's 2-piece wrap. And you can see the edge around there where I folded it in. Then press that down there good and put this on there, trimmed it up, hit it with a lighter. And that is where we got the miniature box at. And also, I'm thinking about it, all my boxes have this piece of Velcro, and that is something I do to them. And that allows, because I went ahead and put some of this Velcro on all my belts so I can click them to this when they're down in there. So when I'm putting this into the gun, they kept falling out and getting stuck in between the mount and everything. So that prevents that from happening. While we're talking about the mount here, this is some other things I've made with this same material is to go ahead and make this one unit. So when you're trying to push this up in the gun, you don't push this off and it fall on the ground, because that was a problem I was having. I went ahead and made what I call the key here, which is just a little L-shaped piece that I went ahead and put a little lever onto, and it also has one of the shims similar to the ones on the box there to space it to where it fits this properly. And what that does is you just insert it into the bottom on this side. You go under there, flip your lever up, and that locks it in place, and now your box can't fall off when you're using it. So that's something I come up with recently because I got kind of tired of the boxes falling off. That also works with your factory boxes as well. So that's something else pretty cool I've come up with just to kind of make this simpler to insert into the gun. And the last thing I made here, just kind of one more thing, is I made this little, what I call the funnel. And that is because the first time and the only time I've messed with these disintegrating links, if you watch that video, you can see them, some of them fly over the top of the box when it's trying, instead of going into it and catching them. So went ahead and made that little bit of a funnel there to go ahead and prevent that from happening. So now I can play with these and not have to worry about losing in my links. So that's just something else I thought was pretty cool. And it also works as a kind of a cover for this if you have belt down into it to keep it from dumping out. So kind of a multi-purpose little thing there. Kind of locks onto that as well, but it's made specifically for the actual boxes that came with it, so you can use those links. But really, I just figured I'd go ahead and cover a few of the different things that I've made for the belt fed, specifically the number one being the box here. Excuse me. Figured someone else would find that interesting. It's a pretty cool setup, I thought. Really happy with the way that's come out, especially for the fact that I literally made it from scratch, as you've seen there. So that's all I had for you today. Okay, if you made it this far, I just want to say thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and share. If you're looking for more FunNGun right now, you can click one of the 2 recommended videos there. If you're looking for more FunNGun later, you can go ahead and click that there subscribe button. I sure would appreciate it. And if you're finding me from Facebook, go ahead and click that open app button at the top to make all that a lot easier, and I'll see you next time.